Creativity and community are absolutely vital in challenging times. Welcome to Syncreate, a show where we explore the intersections between creativity, psychology, and spirituality. We believe everyone has the capacity to create. Our goal is to demystify the process and expand the boundaries of what it means to be creative. We talk with visionaries and change makers and everyday creatives working in a wide range of fields and media, from the arts to science, technology, and business. We aim to illuminate the creative process from imagination to innovation and everything in between. I'm Melinda Rothaus, and I help individuals and organizations bring their dreams and visions to life. At Syncreate, we're here to support your creative endeavors. So if you have an idea for a project or a new venture and you're not quite sure how to get it off the ground, find us at syncreate.org. Our book, also called Syncreate, now available in both print and audiobook format, walks you through the stages of the creative process so you can take action on your goals. We also offer resources, creative process tools, and coaching to help you bring your work to the world. My guest today is Dr. Tamara Russell. She's a clinical psychologist, neuroscientist, martial artist, and mindfulness trainer. She works as an academic and clinician, exploring the use of embodied mindfulness in the work of transformation and self-development. Tamara is involved in international collaborations, looking at how mindfulness training changes the structure and function of the brain. She is the director of the Mindfulness Centre of Excellence in London, an organization dedicated to the wider dissemination of mindfulness, with a particular focus on innovation in the delivery of mindfulness across a variety of sectors and populations. Welcome, everyone, back to the Syncreate podcast, and I'm so delighted to be with Dr. Russell today, coming in from the UK. And our kind of focus, we had so many great brainstorms, right, before we actually came to today, but kind of settled on the topic of sort of the power of play and the connections between creativity, embodiment, and play. And I know you've straddled so many different worlds and different disciplines. So excited to delve into these topics. And so, we know from the research, and I think probably most of us from our own experience as well, that play and creativity are deeply interconnected. And often when I lead, creative workshops or retreats or things like that, the invitation is to return to play, because as adults, so many of us have kind of lost that a little bit. So like going back to being a kid again and experimenting, and so much of that, as I can tell, I'm making all these movements, right? It's an embodied kind of experience. So, Dr. Russell, tell us more about, how you kind of see this intersection between creativity, embodiment, and play, and what's salient there.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's something about the developmental pathway and how we play as children, and where does that get lost, and why is it that as adults we're so reticent? And I suppose I'm mindful, even in very dire circumstances, children will play.
Yes.
So there's something very kind of innate there around the process of play as part of our development. And essentially, I see play, the function of play, as a safe space to start to explore a relationship to the world where, in theory, there's not right or wrong. And it's the very act of doing it that is rewarding. It's not so much the outcome. And so thinking about it in those terms, the value of play for adults And if we're thinking about innovation, for example, in any sector, but in the business sector, quite interested in innovation, aren't they? Um, we want to think about play as this opportunity as a safe space to make mistakes, to test things out, to have some different hypotheses about which things fit together and can that stick go in that tire over there, and how do these objects relate to each other, how do I relate to the different objects. And I remember sort of way back when, I can't remember which company it was, but in order to kind of help some of the employees get over the fear of AI, they hired a director of play, and
Lovely.
her job was to I think it was to get accountants to play, which
Yeah.
I have to say was probably quite a tricky task.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it was about, yeah, how to get over the fear of the unknown by coming into this more playful mode.
Yes.
Adults are reticent. Yeah, a lot of adults are very reticent. Sorry, go ahead.
Particularly in corporate settings, right? Where tend to be so focused on, deadlines and bottom line, thing like that, that people, executives often don't feel there's room for play or time for play. And yet we know it is so important in innovation.
And you could think about the embodiment piece. So, I
Yes.
would say that play definitely, involves this kind of physical interacting with objects.
Yes.
So, often when I'm doing work with senior leadership, even if I can't get them to, enact the body and do these kind of performing performing exercises, I'm gonna get little bits of Lego or little popsicle sticks or just something that invites, relating to objects or bringing an object into an embodied sensing. It might just be with the hands. If you can put it into the body, it's so much more powerful. But you're into that sort of performance edge there. Adults
Right.
see it as performance,
Mhm.
and the judging monkeys, the comparison monkeys, the status monkeys all come, roaring up into the mind space. And it takes a very skilled person to really create the psychological safety that can let, a team of workmates really play together. Now, if you're running a retreat and you got more of that social contracting
Sure.
about we're gonna do those things, you can probably go a bit deeper, a bit quicker. But there was a great study that came, I mean, it's really informed my work, from King's College London neuroscience department. And they were neuroscience students, and half of the students sort of literally read the book about what is a neuron and,
Yeah.
how the neurons work. And the other half had to enact what the neural growth cone does during development.
Wow.
So this is like the head of the neuron
Yeah.
that's sort of I mean, literally they were doing this, they had to figure out with their bodies, and they could have some props like bits of paper, like how does that neural growth cone, find its way to make the connections that it needs to make in the developing brain. So essentially they had two groups, embodied learners, a bit more playful, and of course the students were all falling on the floor laughing and having a super fun time, and then the more sort of book learning. And the test of understanding was drawing a neuron.
Uh-huh.
So they just kept it creative all the way through, which I loved.
Yeah.
And so they got, students that had the book to draw, students that did embodied learning to draw, and they also got postdocs and lecturers to draw. And they did some kind of analysis. It was sort of like a qualitative analysis, looking at how sophisticated the drawings of the neurons
Mhm.
were. How much, depth did they have, or how much detail did they have? And essentially, the students that learned through play and embodiment drew neurons that suggested their understanding was more aligned to the postdocs and the lecturers.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Yeah.
So I call this accelerating the learning, accelerating
Yes.
and deepening the learning when you have to put it in your body, because all these questions start to come that when you're just thinking about it, they're not there.
Well, and it strikes me also that when you're just learning something from a book, and I mean, I studied these things as well, and you see the shape of the neuron and, the axon and all the things. I mean, you might be able to draw what you saw in the book, but in the embodied situation, you're experiencing it from the perspective of the neuron, not just looking at it from outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I saw it referred to as differentiated learning. I mean, I think
Yeah.
across disciplines, probably there's lots of different language, and maybe your kind of listeners and your viewers might be like, "Oh no, we do that in my discipline." But I'm always opening to discover more. But I heard this woman say, unfortunately, I can't remember her name, and she said, it illuminates the questions you didn't know you needed to ask.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes
So that's
sense.
one part of it. That's the deepening the curiosity and deepening the learning. And then the other project which I loved, oh, I love it so much, and again, you can look this up. It's called something called Dance Your PhD.
Ah, okay, love it.
And there's a guy, John Bonham, I think his name is. He did a TED talk about it. And he basically said, I'm trying to understand, what is dynamical fluid something or other in physics, some really complicated physics topic that if you were a non-specialist reading a book, you would be lost by sentence two.
Sure.
But he had dancers he like had choreography of dancers behind him showing with their bodies and showing with their movement, well, when the atom heats up, it starts to disperse. And then when there's cooling, the atoms do this. And the bodies were like moving. And I mean, obviously, I can't quite remember it all, but I remember at the time just thinking, I definitely understand this more than I ever thought I could.
Of course. Right, right, right.
Given that it's a very complicated topic. So he set up this challenge for students, Dance Your PhD, whereby you had to sort of show what your research was about in a 5 to 7 minute piece of choreography that you could either do yourself or you could get dancers to do. And it's so fascinating. Like, again, the student experience of trying to, like, well, does that dancer go there? Or does that one go there? And is that one behind or in front or underneath or on
Yeah.
top? Or like they move together or so suddenly all these relational dynamics come into play. And then the second part is the person watching is like, I believe, using this mechanisms of the perception of the human moving body, which are so developed in
Yes.
most human brains, very, very developed. The
Yeah.
intentionality, the relationships between body. It's like it's feeding our understanding through this different embodied route. And the final piece there is some brains really like to learn like that.
Yes. Right, right.
Yeah.
It's giving me all kinds of thoughts about designing curricula and things, but yeah, I love that. And so I know you also practice and I think teach also martial arts. And so how does that come into like how does your training in these physical embodied and you also work with a lot with mindfulness. So how does that inform your academic work, your work within organizations and so forth?
Well, the answer is in a multi-layered
Of
way.
course.
So I'll try to, again, just pick a few examples. I think there's some general philosophical principles from
Yes.
martial arts that are really great for leadership. And I was revisiting the other day, Arnold Mindell's The Leader as Martial Artist
Uh-huh.
book, which, I mean, I really love his work. I think he died a few years ago, but this was somebody that was rock solid with a multi and transdisciplinary approach. Um, I often, my two quoting kind of sources are Bruce Lee and Kung Fu Panda,
Right.
just to bring some lightness to it. But it's interesting because often we know the quotes, but
Yes.
then we don't know the
Like,
quotes.
what does that really mean? Yeah.
What does it really mean? So, there's some playful things that one can do there around, water can flow and it can crash. So for example, I'm running something in London next week with executive education, and we do an embodied exercise around how do we respond, right? Whether it's to conflict or to a challenge. And so we can respond in this kung fu way with
Yes.
this like yangy, kind of really yangy block. Or how is it to respond? Same block, same movement, same intention, but the how has changed,
And such a difference in the energy
right?
of these two. The one is more aggressive and kind of the movements. I'm trying to describe for people who might be listening and not seeing the video, but just kind of the fist and the sharp movements, right? Versus that more tai chi, qigong kind of flowing, soft
Yeah.
movement. Yeah, and what a difference energetically that makes in any given situation.
Yeah, and for leadership, this is well, for anybody really, it's about cognitive flexibility and choice.
Yes, yes.
And so within that, we start to notice, well, what's my preference?
Yep,
What's my habit? What was my conditioning? What's my
yep.
my preference? What's my choice? Is
Yes.
where we begin to develop that cognitive flexibility. And I do sometimes make that link with, you know, just as we might aspire to physical flexibility, particularly as we age, we want to keep up with the stretching and we want to, do just a lightweight training, not too much, but we want to keep the body flexible and
Yeah.
moving. So it is with our brain and with the neural pathways. There is this kind of tendency towards rigidity and sinking into habitual ways of being in the world as we age. And maybe there's the invitation to maintain playfulness in order
Yes.
to keep that neuroplasticity alive.
Yes.
But it's not easy, right? Because your brain is always looking for these shortcuts.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. But I mean, it's also making a case for, as we get older to keep trying new things and keep exploring, keep playing, right? Not just get kind of into the same routines all the time and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, and you asked about the mindfulness piece. I mean, I've been working for many years on a program called Body and Mind Training.
Yes.
It started in sort of 2010 as I was coming out of my academic research. I just finished my clinical doctorate, and I was investigating how can my learnings from martial arts and Tai Chi be of use for the clients I was working with at that time with sort of the more severe and enduring, what we call here in England, severe and enduring mental health. Not very
Yeah.
nice name, but these are sort of the more chronic conditions, maybe like schizophrenia or bipolar. Not just sort of a quick depression that you might get over, but this is probably something you're going to be managing for your life. So how do we find ways to particularly get back to the body when the mind is
Yes.
getting a bit big and a bit fruity?
Yes.
How do we get back into the body, and how do we start to play with that body mind relationship in a way that maybe can help those who are having very intense or intrusive thoughts and very intense experiences in the body? So that was really the starting point, and then, Mindfulness in Motion is the book that sort of lays that out, but it was this combination of the moving body, sort of drawing on some Tai Chi practices because
Mhm.
they're just beautiful movements, but then really coming in a little bit more with this pincer maneuver, which is, movement sensations creating something for the mind to hold on to, but then very deliberately tuning in.
Yeah.
So you've got that attentional top-down piece going on, and you've got the moving body, the bottom up. And it just works really, really well.
Yeah.
And and the worst case scenario is you've moved your body and you're feeling quite good. And the best case scenario is you're moving your body, you're feeling good, you're developing body awareness, you're starting to train inhibitory networks of the brain, which is great for self-control,
Yes.
attention networks of the brain. And, of course, you're discovering so much about yourself when you really study your body and your posture and the subtleties of approach, avoid.
Yes.
It's happening all the time, so
Mhm.
much happening in the body.
Mhm.
So you can go from just very sort of superficial, like, "Oh my gosh, that feels amazing to just do that shoulder roll,"
Right.
to, a full understanding of your emotional intelligence through the expression of stress and emotion in the shoulders.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that makes me think about, how much stimuli we're all taking in all the time. And, we can only attend to so much at any given time, but the body feels it all and senses it all and holds a lot of things. And so just like as you say, just doing the shoulder roll or the mindful breath or shifting position, the more we can become aware of what is happening in our body and being able to connect with that and feel that and then articulate it also is so important, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's gradients because and I like, I think it's Christine Caldwell's Bodyfulness is a wonderful book, and she's really synthesized things very beautifully. She's got a number of videos on YouTube that people can search for Bodyfulness, and she talks about this dichotomy. Well, it's not really a dichotomy, maybe it's a continuum
Yeah.
of moving and being moved.
Yes.
And I love this because,
Mhm.
over here we've got kind of willful agency, goal-directed movements that could be the forms or the kata from martial arts or, dance choreography and things like that. And then somewhere over here you've got, I am being moved or something moves me,
Yes.
uh, more emergent, where you might be finding some of the more somatic psychotherapies or dance psychotherapies or free movements or um and then maybe kind of five rhythms is sort of somewhere in the middle, isn't it? There's a bit of a
Mhm.
structure, but you're encouraged to flow.
Yes.
And the pinnacle of martial arts, of course, is those two meet. You do the structural training and you do it to such a degree that then when you need it, you're in full flow, right?
Yes.
So I think the idea maybe is somewhere in the middle is that sweet spot of, a trained body that lets go.
Yeah, right, right, knowing when and how to let go is so important. Yeah, and I think this conversation is also, kind of sparking for me we've talked about this in some of our conversations leading up to today, and also something I've been exploring and very interested in, well, is this, and especially in these times, of course, questions of power and empowerment, right? And
Mhm.
how, some of these physical practices and body awareness can also help us connect with our sense of agency and empowerment, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I think I've sort of got a quote that all the thousands of things I wanna
yeah.
do on my social media, but it's something like, never underestimate the power of a small intentional movement,
Yes.
particularly when everything feels out of control. We feel like we're just being swept along, whether it's by sort of social media or that sort of information overload and just cognitive load and tasks. And, you know, when we feel out of control, again, it's the tiny pause,
Right.
take a shoulder
Exactly.
roll.
Yeah.
Um, it can be so powerful. And and there's, underneath the brain's movement system or I would say deeply connected to the brain's movement system is this network of agency and intentionality. And,
Yes.
this is how I'm choosing my movements. And so the control of movement is directly related to the control of consciousness.
Absolutely, and this makes me think about how, traditional education was sit still and be quiet, right? And now how we're talking about experiential learning and getting into the body, but, controlling people's movement is a way of controlling people's experience and even thinking, right?
Yeah, and I mean, thinking about, my example is from North America, but I'm sure there's others. The control of movement of Indigenous and First Nations
Of
people
course, of course.
is a very macro level
Mhm.
example of that.
Yeah.
A more micro level might be, yes, it's still in the classroom, or I don't know, 15-minute cities, or these sorts of things,
Yeah.
which will be new to some of us, like this idea that I don't have freedom. And of course, we're extremely privileged as, who we are and where we were born, that we've experienced that. And I'm aware that, there's many women certainly in,
Of
in the world
course.
that don't have that. But those are the freedoms that we must protect.
Yes.
But, can we change the world with a shoulder roll? That's where I'm starting,
You
what's
gotta start somewhere,
possible?
right? And we each have to start individually also.
But I worked with a client. I mean, he works in a sort of what we call in the UK, this magic circle law firms, these sort of top 5 um, super duper law firms. And we were doing, I start every session, with an, alert, relaxed posture, shoulder roll, maybe some dragony wings. And we were just doing the shoulder roll, and he was like, "Oh gosh, this feels so good. I really need to do this during the day, but I couldn't do this in the office." So that's fascinating to me.
Yes, right. Like, again, we have to
These
move
are
in
like
such controlled
unseen
ways.
unseen kind of control mechanisms
Yes.
around what's appropriate at work, what's
Mhm.
allowed.
Mhm.
And I mean, I wasn't saying, like, sit on your desk and do a yoga pose,
Right.
like, literally
Just
suggesting a
roll the
couple of
shoulders.
shoulder rolls.
Yeah.
But in these environments where there's such a strong cultural, or maybe we could say a narrow bandwidth of
Yes.
cultural allowing people to move freely,
Yeah.
um, it's very interesting and slightly scary. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a whole pedagogy of how do we learn is one part, explore and innovate is another part. There's definitely part of the process, of course, when sitting still and cracking on is needed. I'm not saying we need to be jumping around like
All the
gorillas
time,
in
right?
the office all the
There's a
time.
time and place, right?
But some of those really forward-thinking educators, I mean, they have essentially got, boxes that you can climb up on the roof of the classroom, and, monkey bars in the classroom, and various things that kids can decide how their bodies want to be as they learn.
Definitely.
And,
Definitely.
I mean, I always kind of do say, like, whenever I'm teaching, online, it's a bit easier because everybody's sort of at home usually. I say, "Look, if you need to be standing up for this, if you need to be wiggling around, if you need to, do some jumping jacks, that's fine." And if it's a face to face, I say, you essentially, like, don't take the mickey, don't take
Yeah.
the piss.
Right, right.
But if your attention to what we're doing will be of a higher quality by getting up, moving to the back of the classroom and sort of stretching a little bit, or
Right.
pumping your arms a little bit, or walking, please do that.
Yes.
Don't get up screaming and shouting and do cartwheels to the back of the classroom, but, let's accommodate one another a little bit better if we can. If we
Definitely,
can.
definitely. And that brings to mind also, I know you do a lot of work with like adult ADHD and different strategies related to, creativity and play and so forth, to accommodate, kind of neurodivergent ways of being, right? So tell us a little more about that.
Well, and what I've also found is they're good for ADHD brain. Well, they may be necessary for ADHD brains, but they're good for all brains.
Of course,
Um,
right?
the main one is, I think a top tip I would say is if you can have multiple workspaces,
Yes.
because I can reset my brain by moving from my kind of office space to another space. And if I notice that my attention is flagging or I'm moving to a particular kind of task, literally just physically moving my body into a
And
different
changing the
environment,
environment, yeah.
because I really feel my my extended cognition, it feels very porous for
Yeah.
me.
Yes.
I'm kind of sensitive to the environment. So when I
Sure.
change it, it can help to change my state.
Mhm.
Um, I've got things like, we did this on the weekend, wait while you're waiting.
Oh,
So
yeah, I love
down
that.
in I work from home, so, down in my kitchen, I've got right literally next to the kettle, my 2 weights, and when I'm boiling the kettle for my coffee, I'm just there doing some, mindful little bits of weightlifting and, just small things. I mean, not to get sweaty or anything, but, using weights really can be a good way to increase the mindfulness, because you're increasing the sensation just from the
Definitely.
small strain, not crazy, but a little bit one.
Yes.
The other one is, I think many parents of children with ADHD know this, is I've got a movement mat. So essentially, again, down in my kitchen, I've got a yoga mat on the floor by the breakfast bar.
Mhm.
And anytime I cross over that mat, I have to do some movement.
I love it, I love it.
And I did something with a parent once, and she said, "Well, we haven't got a mat, and that feels like a bit of a tripping hazard." So she put bits of tape down. So
Uh-huh.
whenever the kids or anybody in the family, like, crossed over this bit of green tape, and by the time they got to the next bit of green tape, and that worked really well because she could move it around
Oh, yeah.
to keep the novelty, right?
The
To keep the
movement
novelty. So
space.
that you need that. So it was like a
Yeah.
little movement space, and the kids had to do a little, 10 jumping jacks or something like that.
It's
So
such a great reminder. Yeah, and it strikes me too, when you're talking about the weights, I notice this when, for example, like I go on a walk because I'm trying to get my steps and get my exercise in versus when I just, happen to get a bunch of steps in because I'm out doing functional movement. So the weights, rather than okay, this is my time to go to the gym and I may or may not make it that day. But if it's right in the kitchen next to the kettle and you just pick them up and do a few rounds, or just even one round, several times a day, it gets in there, right?
well, yeah, it's the little and often.
Yeah,
And if you might hark back, I think some of it's a bit romanticized and idealized, but, the agricultural sort of old human way,
sure. Where people were
was
moving
almost
all
that
day
sort of,
long.
yeah, slow and steady, and you were moving, and you might move from one task to another. Even the idea of the gym is sort of coming into question now,
Yes, right.
as a model for fitness and health, not only what you do in the gym, but also just that doing bursts.
Right.
I think it's age related too,
Hmm.
probably. I mean, I loved those crazy training, like hours and hours of training
Yeah.
in the kung fu, like, and then just collapsing in the sauna for 2 or 3 hours afterwards. I mean, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Um, but you mentioned about walking, and I think where the mindfulness comes in is it's the intention
Yeah.
behind the movement.
Hmm.
Is the intention to pay attention to the moving body? Is the intention to pay attention to the breath?
Hmm.
Is the intention to pay attention to sounds?
Yeah.
is the intention to be present with movement as a whole. I mean, there's so many
And that
variations
can
on.
change the quality of the experience. Like, I have some spinal injuries, and I work with a physical therapist who's also a Feldenkrais practitioner, and she'll give me little exercises to do and things, and like, when I'm walking, like I tried this, over the past few days when I was walking, either to try and be really mindful about my posture, and versus like another day I was like, I'm just going to let myself be completely natural. And what you're placing your attention on at any given time does affect your experience, of course. Yeah.
Well, I love running and, again, on my list of 1,000 things that I want to do, but I probably will get round to it this year. This idea of, it could be like 10 steps, or it could be a certain part of the run, like, the bit from my house to out of the village, or from the road at where I go up to the forest, a segment of the run. I try to set the intention,
Yeah.
this part, I'm feeling feet. I wanna
Mhm.
hear the sound of the feet. I wanna
Yeah.
be feeling the feet, noticing, the weight shifting, noticing maybe a little bit, I mean, even length, you've gone into something else, but because you've gone into leg there, but, feeling the feet. Then I'm almost like doing a what we would call a traditional body scan, but
Yes.
in the run, now
Mhm.
I'm on the breath.
Yeah.
Now I'm tuning into sounds, with or without music, of course, because that's a whole 'nother level, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like a mindful run where I'm selecting different focused attention objects,
Yes.
and it's so interesting to do that. But then there's also a beautiful moment when you say, "Release all effort,"
Yeah. And
and then
how
it's like,
freeing
where do
that
I
is.
where do I land? Where do
Yeah.
I land in the body then? Where does
Yes.
awareness land in the body then?
Yes. And just the concept, I think, in in these times, in this day and age of releasing all effort, that's radical, right?
This I ca again, I've been so many people sending me books and things. I think there's a book called Rest as Rebellion or Rest
Yes.
as Revolution,
Mhm.
and maybe there's a particular piece around the feminine there, the doing less and
Mhm.
being more.
Yeah.
But it's a paradox, isn't it? And that's Wu Wei. Wu Wei
Yes.
invites us to step back into the willingness and into the surrender, but I think it's a mistake to think that that doesn't require training. So there you've got that, or you've always got that yin yang balancing act,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
because sort of an untrained Wu Wei is kind of just like could be bypassing, couldn't it? Could
Totally,
be
like,
could
loosey-goosey,
be
right.
bypassing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I love it, and how I find that in my body, that, Tai Chi invites us to alert,
Yeah.
and kind of I'm sort of like shimmying a little bit to kind of
Mhm.
get my body upright
Yep.
and slightly dropping the chin, and we imagine donkey ears, little long donkey ears pulling up to the sky. I'm alert in the spine is alert, but then I'm soft everywhere else. I
Yeah.
drop, and
Yeah.
everything needs to just hang off the skeleton.
Mhm.
And so I'm not alert like a soldier, because then I'm gonna get really tired because
Right,
I
and then
can't
you're
move.
so tense, right? Yeah, absolutely, it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, and I'm not too relaxed like a surfer, because then I'm not really in it. I have to have this quality of inside, I'm a soldier, but outside, I'm a surfer.
Yeah, I love that. Like the Buddha said, not too tight, not too loose, right? And even in meditation, having that sense of, upright posture, but then I've heard the analogy of like, allowing the body to relax like clothes on a rack or on a hanger, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
skeleton is the structure, and then we can relax within that. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, um, this has been such a lovely conversation. We've gone so many places. So I usually like to bring things to a close with what I call a creativity pro tip and something that people can take and try out on their own. And I think we've already had many examples in our conversation today of things people could try. But for somebody who's maybe beginning to explore their embodiment or wants to find a way to come back to play, do you have like a really good kind of go-to exercise that you might share?
Well, I mean, I thought I just it's always like trying to think too many. I mean,
Right.
I think there's, a really quick one I would say is, alert, relaxed posture and a shoulder roll.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised at how much you might forget to do that. But, if you can do that throughout the day,
Yeah.
particularly if you're spending a long time sitting at your desk, these are like
Mhm.
movements that you can make while you're sitting still, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's start with where we're at, which is we are often sitting in front of our computers. Then I've given a few tips, maybe setting some timers to get up and have a walk, maybe thinking, what are the meetings I can do while I can walk? Can I do any walk and talk meetings? So when
Yes.
I'm doing line management, I'm always on the lookout. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, what meeting can we do walk and talk?
Yeah.
So, and that leads me to, one of the things that saves my life every day is this compassionate to-do list.
Yes. Yes. I
Um,
love that.
and so really to help the ADHD brain get organized. But as I go to this compassionate to-do list, I set my intention. I write it in big letters up at the top. Ease and kindness. That was the one that I wanted, but you could
Yes.
find your own, ease and kindness. Sometimes I put brackets, focus. But
Yeah.
I'm actually more important for me is ease and kindness at this point for me, ease and kindness. Then I'm starting to plan my day and I'm trying to look for places where I can either, I know this person is gonna be able to, accommodate
Mhm.
shoulder rolls, like, this person, don't bother,
Right. Right.
who's acclimatized to it, who isn't. I'm
Yeah.
looking for moments when I can do what I call these greens, which is, activating the rest and digest system, the soothing
Yes.
system of the brain to give me these little micro pauses and micro resets. And I'm also mapping, like, what are the things that are gonna be difficult? What am I avoiding? What am I
Mm.
procrastinating?
Yeah.
So there's kinda like a color system that's linked to the motivational systems of the brain, from somebody by Professor Paul Gilbert. And, when we're at work, we're in this kind of blue mode, getting things
For
done,
sure.
and we get so involved in it that we lose track of the body. We don't notice the shoulders coming up.
Yeah, yeah.
And then somebody annoys us or we get a difficult email and,
Yeah, like,
it's all just adding.
yeah.
So it's almost like color coding through the day,
Mhm.
looking for opportunities, and it's the little and often,
Yes.
um, because, I mean, it'd be great if I could, if I could walk every day or if I could, do X or Y or, loads of things we know are good for us. But the reality is they often take, 3 hours or more, including going to the gym,
Right.
you know?
Which we may not have, so
So
yeah.
so what have you got that takes 3 minutes or 3 seconds, What have you got that the shoulder roll, like, I
Yeah.
mean, 3 seconds would be a lovely slow shoulder roll.
Absolutely. I'm gonna do it right now.
Yes.
So good. So I love the compassionate to-do list, and I think it's a great antidote to, the traditional to-do list where it's just like all the things and we can get overwhelmed by it. So like building in those moments of relaxation, intentional, breaks, movement, mindful
Yeah.
breathing, whatever it might be. Love that. Great. Well, it's been such a pleasure. And if people want to learn more about you, what you're up to, your work, your publications, what are the best ways for people to find you?
Yeah, you can find me at
Okay,
thedragonacademy.co.uk,
great.
which is sort of, I mean, it's been a heart project of mine for some years now, but my creative ADHD brain just keeps wandering off and doing other things. So it's taken me quite a lot longer than I initially thought, but it is now a place where I'm building an online community, essentially of people that want to do mindfulness differently. So whether you're a regular ADHD person or just really creative or a bit of a rebel, you don't want to sit still. I'm just building in all my resources, and we have some live sessions and some different activities there as well throughout the year. So that's
Wonderful.
the dragonacademy.co.uk.
Okay.
And I'm at Dr. Tamara Russell on Instagram. Again, trying to find mindful ways to
Yeah, to
use
engage
social
that
media.
way.
It's a
Yeah,
real challenge
it
because,
is.
occasionally, I mean, when I'm having fun, I like it, but that's sometimes the downside of playing
Yeah,
too much.
yeah,
Is I'm just playing and my strategy goes, my carefully designed social media strategy goes out the window because I'm just
right.
having too much fun posting things that are, like, taking my fancy, but
I would say it's always a balance, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. And yeah, we'll perhaps we'll have a chance to talk and meet again.
Yeah, thank you so
Yes,
much. Yeah, and
absolutely.
I really appreciate your work, and I've been sharing some of your podcasts with
Thank
my
you.
Dragon Warriors crew, and pointing them to your episodes. So yeah, please, receive my appreciation.
Yes,
Thank
thank you. I
you
appreciate that so much.
so much.
Find and connect with us on YouTube and social media under Syncreate. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and leave us a review. We're recording today at Record ATX Studios in Austin with Dr. Russell joining us from the UK. The podcast is produced in collaboration with Mike Osborne at 14th Street Studios. Thanks so much for being with us, and see you next time.